Hello, Laura. Hello, Malik. I welcome you to the session to Talking Photo Books. And I'm very happy to welcome you as wonderful colleagues in urban studies to talk about the book Suturing the City. How and where are you right now?
I'm in Hackney, London.
Okay, great.
I'm in Berlin, in Lichtenberg.
I'm in Vienna, and we have different times, I think. And we meet digitally today, of course, because of the pandemic. Normally, we would have sat around a table and showed the book to each other and filming a talk of around 30 minutes about this book that was published in 2016. It's a really major work of Filip de Boeck and Sammy Baloji. It's not their first collaboration, but perhaps the most heavy one until now, besides exhibitions where they collaborated or research projects. We do talk about this book at this occasion because of the soon-to-come publication of a special issue in Ephemera on standby as a mode of organization, organization of the everyday, so beyond a technical understanding of standby. And Laura has published this issue, or is going to publish this issue with Ephemera, with Annika Kühne, Birke Otto, and Vanessa Weber. And perhaps you want to say 2 words about this upcoming issue and a very crucial understanding of standby that you want to put forward there?
Thank you, Alexa. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this special issue finally coming out. It's really the result of a year-long collaboration, mainly between first between the 3 of us, between Vanessa, Annika, and me, and between our PhD projects that have all concentrated on infrastructures, on urban infrastructures in a way. And this is how we came up with the notion of standby. And this is how we got to know many other great people along the way, also Malik, and also you have been contributing to this theme of standby at various moments in time. And as you just said, it's becoming a notion that tries to capture more than a technical standby, but also this kind of active inactivity between humans and all kinds of materialities and more than human actors. But I'm sure we will be talking more about it.
Yeah, and we will do so by this with the help of the book that you, Malik, choose to discuss it with us. And Laura and I were very happy to discuss this book in relation to what standby or the promise as research perspectives could mean for urban research. And it's true, beyond standby, it's really a wonderful book within the interdisciplinary field of urban studies, coupled with arts. And I've already requests from other colleagues to talk about this book in Talking Photo Books. But Malik, since you choose it, why this book with respect to standby and promise, and how do you relate to it? Perhaps we already changed the mode of the camera. Thank you.
So in this rather iconic, well, soon to be or already iconic photo of in Kinshasa, what I was interested in terms of this book is not only because Kinshasa is the world's largest urban area of people living with less than $1 a day, but also because it embodies the way in which a city grows and endures simply on the factness of its being inhabited. that is, in ways in which an economy is elaborated through the sheer fact that people are there that need to be housed, that need to be fed, that need to have varying collaborations with each other, and whose activities need to be administered in some way. But what I find interesting about this particular photo is also within the way in which it foregrounds through the cell phone towers, the importance of technicity in all of its dimensions. In a way in which you have almost an invagination of the human and technical, even within an urban context which seems to register a deficit of infrastructure, a large swathe of material insufficiency. Yet there is a kind of technical poetics always entailed in terms of the way in which a politics of inhabitation is elaborated. Not to say that Kinshasa represents a kind of generative resilience. I don't want to say that, but rather that there is a kind of intermingling of the technical and human in its most elemental sense, which I think is important. Is important to foreground whenever we talk about urbanities.
And I also changed my camera now. I think it was this chapter that was full of these images that are representing very nicely what you were just saying. And in our preliminary talk about the book, you told us about the instantaneity of decisions that is so very much linked to what is present and co-present in the form of pharmacies in this very dense and fluid urban tissue. Tissue is perhaps not the right word, but what we see here on the pictures. And we started then in this first vision discussion about the book to look for pharmacies which allow for this kind of temporality and stand by as a kind of instantaneity of decisions. And if we go through it, we see here a pharmacy, and there are perhaps things that come from a pharmacy. But in this chapter, we had really a lot of hints to what this kind of standby notion could mean. Here you have another pharmacy. So is there something in, sorry, you can see it better like this. Is there something special to be said about this pharmaceutical temporality that links for you to standby?
Well, in some sense, it is you can play with the notion of the pharmacological or the pharmacon being both cure and toxin, and by that I mean that there is such an intensive temporality of the now. It's not that people are unable to anticipate. They do anticipate. It's not that they're unable to recount a history that could be salient for what you decide in the moment. But yet there is a kind of temporality, as you say, of instantaneity that is unanticipated, that is unplanned for, where the sudden acquisition of that surfeit of extra spending money, the acquisition of an opportunity to consume that one didn't expect, and in some ways the pharmacy stands by that prospect available at that moment, at that instantaneity, to spend on medicine or medicine or cosmetic or something extra that indicates the symbol of a kind of a step toward wellness. I mean, of course, this kind of temporality with the inability to think about a near or even long-range future in some ways condemns that inhabitation to a kind of repetitiveness, a redundancy of sheer survival at times. But in some ways, ironically, the pharmacy is there standing by for that extra step that could be taken to ensure a cure or a prolongation of wellness into a different kind of temporality.
And I think we will come back to this as kind of aspirations and multiplicity of aspirations in STEM. But Laura, you had another main image photograph in this book that you were linking to temporality, I think, right?
Yes, thank you, Alexa. We came to this also while talking about the pharmacy still, and I think what you mentioned in the end, Malik, about this idea or even the promise that the pharmacy bears of being cured. We discussed this also when we talked about the notion of suturing last time, that is in the title of this book, and how suturing is not about really curing, right? About I think Malik gave us this this metaphor of the stitches in the suturing that can fall apart, of the wounded that cannot be cured. And at that point in the conversation, I would really like to show you this picture about the hole, which I like a lot. It's a very dark picture, so I hope you can see it well. It's about this umbrella placed in the pothole at the side of the street at night, and this is really my favorite picture for showing how suturing is not necessarily about repair, right? And the book explains this also here on the same page by referring to Lacan, where he says that to suture or the suture is always between something as a lack, as something impossible to conceptualize, and zero as a number, as one. And this is quite interesting for me, because this is exactly how we defined standby for this issue of ephemera, also as a kind of switch off that does not cut connection. And this is just like in the standby symbol that we've chosen for the cover of this issue, and which I brought to you on my smartphone today. I hope you can see it. This is like the preview of the cover now. That's how we have it now. So here you can also see how there is this one within a zero, right? And how this represents in the standby symbolic simultaneity of on-offness in computer language, but also of inactivity, as I said in the beginning of our discussion. So this umbrella in the pothole, but also this fire pit in the cracked asphalt here on the side of the street. These are ways of inhabiting that have reminded me also, while going through the book, of pothole dealings in Rio de Janeiro, which I have observed, and which which residents have explained as a way of maintaining a brokenness, as a way of keeping the city and also urban authorities at distance, and of preventing relations from growing too tight, of taking care of that informal and provisional arrangements remain provisional, right? Just like in this notion of suturing. Yeah, I could say more, but maybe, yeah, this is another image of holes, just to show you this one also. It's just on the page before.
Which reminds us also that the pictures, the photographs by Baloji in this book are somehow widely spread on 2 pages. More often they take half of a side of a page with text, which somehow allows you to stand by the image while you read the text. And that's where I would like to jump to. It also takes up images, given images, as I will show you in a bit. I would like to come back to this aspirational mode that is inscribed somehow into the temporality of standby. And you were, it was in this very dark picture from the night, of course, inscribed in this person that sits there, has some business to do besides the whole. And I think this is a very iconic image of aspiration, in the sense that it's an image of crossing over to set out, or almost having been arrived at the other, how do you say, side of the river. I like the word in English right now, which is they are not yet there, but they are all going there. A lot of people on this boat to cross the river, and they have something in mind why, and they hope to find something on this other side. So this for me is very iconic, and from the colors, it's of course the complete opposite of the other picture we just saw. And of course here you have a lot of people in one spot. And Baloji also works with this kind of representations, which is the other side of the coin of aspirations. And perhaps Malik, you in our preliminary conversation, you were pointing out these kind of cartoonish images, given images of aspiration or promises.
Yeah. I mean, Filip de Boeck himself has emphasized the ways in which imagination is not necessarily a locus of freeing oneself. It is a mechanism of capture, of being complicit with the very kinds of modes of representation that are constraining and even oppressive. But I think that these particular images are have a great deal of ambivalence. On the one hand, they represent the most stereotypical representations of Western consumption and attainment and of wealth. On the other hand, they are so stereotypical and so exaggerated and so lurid in some ways as to constitute a perhaps ironic sensibility. That somehow, by embracing these kinds of built environments and this kind of lifestyle and this form, that it becomes a kind of deconstructive gesture of sort of a kind of wink of their ridiculousness. On the other hand, what these modes of representation, in their sheer exaggeration, are not necessarily guideposts to be embraced, but rather a kind of medium that lures and provokes people to look out beyond the kind of quotidian details of their situation. Whereas you don't look for, this doesn't culminate the destination of what you look for, but rather it is an incitement to look out beyond the confines of what one knows to some other kind of disposition. So that, I mean, if you contrast it with this kind of repurposing of these living environments that are made within the shadows and the ruins of other built environments. It is a kind of sensitivity to look beyond the present connotations of what things are, either as a way to repurpose them in other ways. But so what I'm trying to say is that aspiration isn't, the images of aspiration are not so much the destinations in themselves, but somehow triggers, incitements, simply to look out beyond what one knows and what one expects, to be prepared for that which is in some ways unanticipated.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. And between these pages that we were just going through together, there are different projects of that show exactly what you were saying. And I think, Laura, you had one favorite project in this aspiration that incorporates images of that you could aim at, but is more perhaps a driver to something else. I think you wanted to you were fascinated by the story of this man. Can you tell it to us?
Yes. Also, because I think this, this is kind of another promissory thing in the way that that Malik just put it. Also as a materialized promise that somehow supersedes the human or the speech act promises or urban promises, as we have discussed them before. This kind of promise of better future and stuff like that. So this is an unfinished building, kind of a bricolage tower, right? A megalomaniac project of this kind of self-made vertical urbanism in the very center of Kinshasa. And the book and Baloji present this as an idiosyncratic and even messianic, they say, even messianic statement about a better urban future that is in this tower. And definitely there is a strong desire built into this kind of zigzag and pyramid shapes, which comes out as the book reports about the owner and self-made architect of this building, who's portrayed here on the page before, and who has sacrificed all his money to bring about this vision, which he will not see accomplished in his lifetime, right? However, this very guy, this owner of the house, he sees this as a project to transcend the city, as is narrated in the story here about his project. So how he sees this building is to allow for an autarkic and independent, somehow detached urban collectivity to emerge from this building and to recreate the city from within. So in a way, promissory things like this tower, as I've said, they have kind of superseded human agency, right? They make their own promises for new forms of urban collectivity. And this is quite similar to how Malik and I have also been describing acts of standing by in our article for environment and planning, where we have been describing the holding on to these kinds of promissory things, also as tactical maneuvers that allow for residents to keep the very objects and aspirations connected to these promissory things in play, so to say.
And I mean, ground and soil is very much debated right now, rightfully. Because of one of the last references for speculation, for like any resource, and for building, imagining to build one's own promise that's not the right formulation, but you know what I mean. And I think we have another set of a series of images that goes out of the city or takes a little distance from the city, and where soil and ground is very, very literally linked to standing by in the in the photographs, where we have people standing by the plot. And I should have started from the other way around, which is here. And Malik, you were explaining to us what all the implications of standing by the plot. Could you come back to this?
I mean, here there is how you work out the conflict between ground and soil being able to generate produce that's necessary to feed the city, but also how you maximize the prospective value of those plots, of those land, anticipating that the city will soon encompass it, perhaps, and how to generate value from the intensified urbanization of land across the region. But you're never quite sure whether or not the particular location of that plot, of that ground, is the most opportune or strategically located in all of the different trajectories of growth that might be operative. So what often happens is that a household might hedge their bets in terms of trying to be most opportunistically located. So the need to acquire land south of the airport, anticipating that's the direction where the most intensive urbanization is going to go, or west into the hills where the elites seem to be locating most of the wealth coming from Eastern Congo in terms of new mansions, or and this is a very labor and resource intensive activity, because once you acquire something, you never know whether or not there's going to be competing claims. So you need to position someone there to defend that plot, a family member, because there are all different kinds of routes in tenure systems and quasi-legalities that can be used to both secure and to dispossess. So it's a kind of spreading out, and it's an extension of households across multiple sites, which raises issues about how you manage those multiple sites and the resources that are necessary in order to do so. And so there is this kind of standing by, waiting to see, assessing the extent to which the real value of intensified urbanization will come to you or not.
Yeah, and it's really it's individual stories which are at the same time reflecting a social process which is much wider that the book is telling us here, and Baloji is representing with the photographs. And what I found really, I think these are really the photographs that I like most, and I also like very much how it's represented in the book. What is so astonishing is, or you get somehow an imagination of the situation where those who are photographed somehow get a moment of that they probably have more often than in the photograph, but like standing by the plot. like a moment of reflection. What is going on here? What stand still, still alive, or whatever. It is very, these are very concentrated images and beautifully composed and so on. And the people look directly into the camera. I think sometimes there's even some light set in addition. So this is really that I really think they're very strong. The light in my constellation is not so good, but they are very strong, and you get the story of these people. It's in the text, and I was going on through the book while you were talking here. The closer you come to the city, somehow back from its fringes, you come to see authorities that are also somehow standing beside their authority. It has, I mean, there is authority, that's for sure, but yeah, it's somehow very fragile. It's rooted and fragile at the same time. So I think these images are really interesting. Laura, to come perhaps to almost the end, what do you take from such a medium like an ethnography and a photographic work brought together in this book, composed together for your research on Standby and on the promise of the city?
Yeah, I agree with you that there are really powerful images in this book, and this series is particularly interesting also for this mode that is that comes out from this book, of this mode of narrating a story that goes parallel and independent from the text, right, that is in the book, and this I find quite fascinating. And while you were just talking, the two of you right now, I was thinking that I mean, what I found always important in terms of listening to stories in field work is it's almost as if these images add another layer to this in the book. And there was something that we discussed a lot with my co-editors of the ephemera issue about Standby, also signaling a state of power, right? If we come back to this kind of technical origin of the term, and yet transfer to these life worlds, it's also a command over availability and disposability at the same time, and this kind of standby stuckness that is not really a passive state of stuckness, but that also generates activity. And I think this is really what these images also generate. So yeah, I'm very thankful for having looked at this book through your eyes and your hands over this discussion.
Malik, what are you going to do with the book in your future research and teaching?
For me, it helps to elaborate a notion that is increasingly important for me, which is the notion of accompaniment as opposed to assemblage. And by that, I mean, in this image, you see the image of a land broker, a land authority, a kind of traditional chief responsible for the disposition of land. And of course, land is the biggest game in sort of African urban political economy. There are two basic elements that you have to work with, the body and land. And to maintain some kind of being in charge of the body is the exigency to acquire a piece of land, even though it may never be developed, even though it may never be lived in or inhabited, the urgency to have land. And so land brokerage and how you get it and how you hold on to it and under what auspices and through what means is is critical, and thus the importance on those that have been imbued with some kind of authority over land's disposition. But now what I want to say about that is that this is a kind of process that goes beyond brokerage. It goes beyond, I mean, here the image is of all different kinds of vernaculars and gestures and symbols and tropes being mobilized as part of the politics of land, and thus the politics of inhabitation. But what I mean by accompaniment is that somehow an inexhaustible surplus is brought to bear in this whole process that goes beyond mediation. It goes beyond the kind of exercise of authority. It goes even beyond bearing witness. That somehow there is a process of accompaniment of standing by. Obviously, like when you accompany someone to the store, obviously the person could go to the store and do what he or she has to do without your accompanying them. So in some ways, it's separate from the fulfillment of the task itself. There's something of a supplement, a surfeit of almost undefinable that is brought to bear, that is mobilized. And for me, these customary chiefs, in some way, embody this sense of accompaniment, mm-hmm. something that is brought to bear from a calling, from a destination, from a time, from a space, a location that remains undecidable in some ways, but yet it shows up and is there in the present for these critical kinds of urban transactions.
Yeah, and somehow this would perhaps rearrange the proximity that we saw between standby and promise, because it points to some looseness that is very much related to the promise that I don't really see in standby. I actually never thought about what is the looseness of the promise in standby. And yeah, I think one could think that through with accompanying. How did you say the word exactly? Accompanyization or accompany? Accompany? Your microphone?
It's like I've chosen this notion, which I always find so difficult to pronounce. Accompaniment.
Accompaniment. Okay.
Yeah. It's like you can play the solo, you can go ahead and do it. You don't need the accompaniment. The accompaniment is something extra, something else brought to bear on the task at hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is exactly how we brought together standby and promise in our EPD article, Alexa, because that was the initial idea between Malik and me, because what we have been observing in Jakarta and Rio was this kind of standing by the promise, not as waiting for its fulfillment, right? As if its fulfillment had become almost unimportant, right? I think this also switches around the temporality of the promise, actually, because then the present is not anymore kind of the past of a better future only, but it becomes standby becomes a mode of presencing in this way, and and this I think is very powerfully in these pictures also.
Okay, so let's close the book for today and reopen it at another occasion. Yes, you have the Einband. So thank you very much that you took the time and the somehow not so nice technique and social conditions or situation of that not being around a table, but we will do so soon, hopefully. all the best to you, to Berlin and London. Bye
Yes,
bye.
thank you, Alexa.
Bye.
Thanks you,
Thank
Laura.
you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.